The annual meeting is a special yearly event when Jehovah's Witnesses reveal changes to the doctrine, and the 2023 annual meeting reveals some of the biggest changes this religion has gone through in the past 30 years. Lately, the annual meeting has also become a large part of the personality cult the Jehovah's Witnesses are morphing into, because it features every single governing body member, the leaders of the religion, and rarely anyone else. This allows them to soak in the glory while being at the forefront of this event. And the music segment, introduced by Kenneth Cook, who is presenting this annual meeting, reminds us how important it is to follow and support the governing body.
Other sheep Jesus has, and they serve alongside those anointed to be Christ's heavenly bride. All the things that are done for their comfort and aid are things he considers that must be repaid. If you comforted them, you comforted me. If you did it for them, you did it for me. Your labors for them were your labors for me. You did it for them, you did it for me.
We've heard this song before, but this is the perfect song to introduce this indoctrination session. Also, I think I'll start playing all songs at twice the speed because they are much more bearable like that. This song outright tells you that you need to repay your debt to God by serving what's supposed to be the faithful and discreet slave, whose job is to serve, not to be served.
Now, before we begin the program with song and prayer, we have one announcement to share with all of you. It reads, "We remind you that no video streaming or recordings of any kind are permitted. Any notes taken, whether hard copy or electronic, should not be forwarded to anyone else."
Guys, remember, no video recordings. I don't want to see this on YouTube later. This is something you'll see often in this and any other exclusive meeting. The Jehovah's Witnesses are a supremacist religion, and supremacist groups don't just stop being supremacist when they denigrate the outside group. Supremacist groups work more like a ladder, where the higher you climb up the ranks, the more supreme and exclusive the group will be. Elders feel like they're better than the average Jehovah's Witness, and Bethelites feel like they're better than non-Bethelites. Here, you see it again. You have to have connections in Bethel to be able to watch this annual meeting instead of in a month with the rest of the Jehovah's Witnesses. And Kenneth just reminded everyone of this fact. They're not supposed to share anything from this meeting for the simple reason that they are the ones privileged to hear this new information, unlike the average Jehovah's Witness. And for once, they have a reason to be excited and secretive, because this annual meeting will change the Jehovah's Witnesses. And even Kenneth, who usually has as much energy as a cardboard cutout of himself, seems, for the very first time, excited.
Annual meeting, as an example, I'm going to pick a year of 2013. Now, that annual meeting has been called Landmark. We've even stated that. We called it a landmark annual meeting. Well, you might think that all annual meetings are landmark, and many of us here would agree with that, but that one was very special. At that meeting, the revised edition of the New World Translation in English was released. Very special annual meeting. And that landmark Bible release continues to be a blessing for many people around the earth as more languages are added. Now, 10 years later, exactly 10 years later, we have arrived at another truly landmark annual meeting. This time, Jehovah has helped the faithful and discreet slave to discern deeper principles and understanding from that very same word of truth. And this understanding is now going to be passed on to you. Are you ready? Are you excited to hear it?
That's the most animated I've ever seen Kenneth. But the annual meeting is usually only seen by Jehovah's Witnesses, so the leadership often feels like they can be more normal than when delivering any other speech, and will even come out to say things out loud that normally wouldn't be said.
In recent years, the annual meeting has been an occasion where clarified understanding of Bible truths, a new light, has been announced and explained. Of course, it's not at every annual meeting that this takes place, but when Jehovah makes something known, often it's at the annual meeting where it is announced. Now, will there be new light today? I think Brother Cook already spilled the beans a bit. But we look forward to see what will be what is in store for our program. But have you ever wondered, though, how exactly does Jehovah reveal clarified understanding of the Scriptures, new light, in modern times? When the governing body is meeting together as the faithful and discreet slave, how does it work? How exactly does the light get brighter? How does Jehovah use that arrangement to clarify our understanding?
This is Jeffrey Winder, one of the new guys in the governing body that I often forget exists. And he just told you what I told you. Nowadays, new light is revealed at annual meetings. And he asks what most Jehovah's Witnesses have wondered at least once in their lives. Since you're supposed to change your beliefs as soon as new light is revealed, how does new light get revealed in the first place? New light is a completely made-up term that appears nowhere in the Bible, and Jehovah's Witnesses understand it to be some sort of progressive revelation system, which actually goes against how the Bible says the truth will be revealed. However, Jeff assumes that the new light system is a given, and starts by finding out-of-context verses to support that notion.
By what means does Jehovah reveal new light? Well, for that we can turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 2 and read together 1 Corinthians 2, verse 10. For it is to us God has revealed them through his Spirit. For the Spirit searches into all things, even the deep things of God. So clearly, by what means does Jehovah reveal new light? It's by his Spirit. We recognize the key role that Jehovah's Spirit has in revealing the truth.
Jeff starts with a false premise, then plucks a verse out of the Bible that cosmetically supports his argument when, in fact, it doesn't. But what he does next is even more egregious.
To whom does Jehovah reveal clarified understanding? Well, for that, we can turn to the book of Matthew, chapter 24, and read together Matthew 24, verse 45. Who really is the faithful and discreet slave whom his master appointed over his domestics to give them their food at the proper time? So clearly Christ has appointed the faithful and discreet slave, and it is through this channel that Jehovah, through Christ, works to provide spiritual food.
Jeff is very clearly showing how flawed the whole basis of the idea of God's channel is. He says, so to whom does God reveal new light? Well, let's read this verse that asks the question, who is the faithful and discreet slave? As that verse taught us, we are the faithful and discreet slave. He just answered a question with another question that has nothing to do with the question, and then pretended that that was an answer. This is how nonsensical Jehovah's Witnesses' doctrine is, and they rarely put it on display like this. And he keeps extrapolating meanings out of verses to explain his nonsensical doctrine.
When does Jehovah reveal new light? Well, we just have to look back to verse 45 of Matthew 24. The slave will provide the food at the proper time. There's a clear timing element indicated there, isn't there? And so Jehovah reveals clarified understanding at his time, when it is needed, and when it will help us to carry out his will.
Do you see how much meaning they extrapolate out of that question? Jesus asked the rhetorical question, who is the faithful and discreet slave that serves food at the proper time? And Jeff just said, as the Bible says, me and my buddies are the faithful and discreet slave. And since it says proper time, that means we need to update the doctrine all the time. It's ridiculous, and it just keeps going.
At what rate does he reveal new light? Is it all at once like a dump truck, or is it metered out like a trickle? Well, the answer to that is found in the book of Proverbs. chapter 4, in verse 18. Proverbs 4:18. But the path of the righteous is like the bright morning light that grows brighter and brighter until full daylight. So the Bible here uses the illustration of daylight. And what does that teach us? Well, the Watchtower said, these words aptly apply to the way in which Jehovah reveals his purpose to his people gradually.
No, it doesn't. As I've previously described in the channel, this verse is talking about the path of the righteous man that's clear as day and doesn't make you stumble. That's what the verse is talking about. But the Jehovah's Witnesses take this one verse out of context to justify their progressive revelation system, because that system is completely absent from the Bible. He then goes on to compare how things are resolved today to how things were resolved in the first century in the Bible when the issue of circumcision arose. He does what the Jehovah's Witnesses do and pretend that the issue was taken to the governing body, when in fact it was taken to the place where the issue originated, and it was discussed openly with everyone involved, instead of being discussed behind closed doors by only a select few, which is how Jehovah's Witnesses do this process. And then he proceeds to tell us a sanitized version of how the process happens.
So generally, the process happens this way. First of all, a question comes up. And so it could be that a governing body member in his personal study or his personal Bible reading notices something that then raises a question. Or it could be that a question comes up during the preparation or translation of spiritual food that requires more consideration. World events might put the spotlight on a particular prophecy that then gets closer attention. So in one way or another, a question comes up. And that question is then put on the governing body's agenda for discussion. And the question is, does this require or warrant additional research? The brothers are not making a final decision on what the new understanding will be, just asking, does it warrant additional research? And if the answer is yes, then a research team is assigned to provide recommendations and research for the governing body to consider. And this research includes a summary of everything that we have said, the organization has said on the subject since 1879. All the Watchtowers, what have we said? Also, it includes what the context of the verse indicates about its meaning. Further, what bearing do parallel accounts have on the understanding of the account, if there are any parallel accounts? And finally, what impact does the original Hebrew or Greek have on our understanding of the verse? Well, once that whole research package is compiled, it's placed back on the governing body's agenda for review. And of course, once it goes on the agenda, then each individual member of the governing body, under prayer, reviews the information and thinks about it in preparation for the meeting. And then it's discussed as a group at the governing body meeting, again, under prayer, relying on Jehovah's Holy Spirit. Now, when this matter is discussed, the discussion is not rushed, nor is the decision forced. But often, like in the first century, it's a lively discussion as the brothers feel free to share their opinions and their thoughts, the results of their meditation and their research. But there's also humility there, because again, none of the brothers are trying to force their idea or try to get their thoughts approved, but there is this collective, unified desire to see Jehovah's direction on the matter and where is he steering things. The goal is to discern Jehovah's direction on the matter. And often, or at times, we could say, the final result might be quite different than what the research package originally recommended. But that's Jehovah's Spirit working through the faithful and discreet slave to bring us to the right decision. And the brothers are looking for a unanimous decision. At times, it may seem like this is a solid adjustment, but if it's not unanimous, it just might not be time yet for it to be revealed. And so it's not forced. The matter is set aside. And it could be that sometime later, even some years later, the matter comes back up and then it sails right through. Or maybe it does get approved, but now with a couple of key points discerned that weren't discerned earlier. Well, with this thorough process, under prayer, and when there is unanimous accord, then the brothers take that as Jehovah's direction and then are happy to share it with the brotherhood.
Let's recap. So, when there's a potential new issue, like say when the doctrine is proven to be false, the governing body first gets together to decide whether or not they'll do something about it. If they decide that they need to, then they get other people to do the study for them to look up what it said about the issue, not in the Bible, but in their own publications. Once someone else has done the research, they give it to the governing body, and then they talk about it to decide what to do. Sometimes deciding the opposite of what the research says. And sometimes God doesn't want to reveal the whole truth. He just wants to reveal some of it, and months can pass before it goes through. There is absolutely no presence of God in this process. And I can prove it. If God wasn't a part of this process, like they claim he is, then nothing would change. This is how humans figure out whether or not to change things. If God was a part of it, wouldn't revelations be far more revealing? If the governing body were uniquely qualified to figure out this stuff about doctrine, shouldn't they be the ones in charge of studying the matter instead of relying on others to do the study for them? When do the governing body study the Bible if they study it at all? But that's all that Jeff has to say, and now we move on to David Splain, who's gonna flip-flop on doctrine and pretend it's progressive revelation.
Have you ever asked, for example, will none of those who died in the flood get a resurrection? Even those who may never have heard of Noah? And what about Sodom and Gomorrah? Will everyone who died in Sodom and Gomorrah sleep an everlasting sleep? The women, the children, babies. And was there not one redeemable Assyrian soldier in that band of 185,000 who died at the hand of Jehovah's angel? We don't have the answer to those questions. But we do know one thing. The merciful judge of all the earth will do what is right. Wait a minute. Did I hear that right? We don't have the answer to those questions? I thought we did. In the past, our publications have stated that there's no hope of a resurrection for those who died in the flood or those destroyed in Sodom and Gomorrah. But do we really know that?
This goes against what the Jehovah's Witnesses have recently taught, since they used to teach that since God is righteous and since he killed those people, then he wouldn't have killed someone who was righteous and he would have to resurrect later, because he doesn't kill good people who deserve resurrection. If you're killed by God, you deserve it, which is why I was losing my mind when I was first reacting to this annual meeting on stream. However, I didn't know that this isn't the first time they flip-flop on this doctrine. A recent video by Self-Aware NPC recently recounted all the times they have flip-flopped this doctrine, telling sometimes that those people might get resurrected and other times that they definitely wouldn't, sometimes in the reprint of the same book. I didn't even know that at the time. What I do know is that to me this flip-flop is just muddying the waters, telling you they are the ones who are giving you accurate knowledge of the truth by changing their minds about knowing something. Whereas before they felt they knew, now they're not so sure. And this is supposed to be the light getting brighter. See how the doctrine falls apart even when you take it at face value?
The men of Sodom and Gomorrah were certainly wicked, and they deserved to die for what they did. But did they know any better? How often did Lot and his family preach to them? And are we saying that if special pioneers had been assigned to Sodom, that they would have had no success whatsoever in preaching to the Sodomites, helping them to turn around and come to a knowledge of Jehovah? Can we say dogmatically that not one Sodomite would have repented if Jehovah's requirements had been explained?
Yes, we can say that special pioneers wouldn't have succeeded because they don't even succeed today. This is the superiority complex of Jehovah's Witnesses. Not only do they believe that Lot and all those other people of old were proto-Jehovah's Witnesses that, like them, went door to door and preached the good news, but they believe Jehovah's Witnesses today might have had better success than Lot, who, remember, didn't preach door to door because that wasn't a thing back then. He then goes on to muddy the waters even more by bringing out random Bible quotes that seem to support his argument.
It's also of interest to consider Jehovah's words to unfaithful Judah in Ezekiel 16. Jehovah said that the citizens of Sodom were more righteous than the inhabitants of Judah. So if Sodom is doomed, what about Judah?
Even if this was right and not just hyperbole, all of these verses have been around all this time, which is why we had the previous speech about how new light is given. They have to gaslight you into thinking that new light is Jehovah opening their eyes when the time is right to flip-flop the doctrine once again. And then he goes on to continue pretending all Israelites were proto-Jehovah's Witnesses by pretending that Noah preached to his neighbors.
Now, Noah's contemporaries certainly were wicked. The Bible says that man's wickedness was great on the earth, and every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only bad all the time. So those living at that time were sinners. But did they all get a thorough witness? Noah and his family must have been very busy building the ark. How much time did they have for preaching? And were they able to do seldom worked territory? We have found that people who live within 10 miles of Bethel have never heard of Jehovah's Witnesses. So can we guarantee that everyone living on earth during that time knew of Noah and what he was doing? We can't really say that.
Yes, we can say that. The Bible tells us explicitly that they didn't know that the flood was coming until it came. But the Jehovah's Witnesses changed that verse in the Bible to say they took no note, because they assume Noah preached when there's nothing in the Bible to say he did, and everything to say he didn't. Splain goes into several Bible examples of God forgiving and not forgiving people to further muddy the waters and tell you that new light is not knowing something. This time, not knowing whether people killed by God were truly bad or not. And Splain wants to make sure you know how to explain other people that.
How would you explain it to someone who wasn't here today? You would not say, some who died in Sodom and Gomorrah and in the flood are going to be resurrected, and Solomon isn't going to be resurrected. No, you wouldn't say that. What we're saying is that we shouldn't be dogmatic about who will and who will not be resurrected. We just don't know.
And after that clarification, Splain teases his audience because he knows that the only news the audience wants to know about is about the time of the end.
I know what you're thinking. The wheels are turning. And you're saying to yourself, come on. We've talked about the flood. We've talked about Sodom and Gomorrah. But what about the Great Tribulation? Is there anything that we can or can't say about that? You know, that's a good question. We should talk about that. You know what? I think my time is up.
And with that bit of improv by Splain, we move on to the next governing body member to show up, Jeffrey A.R.C. Jackson, who has a curious confession.
And if you've been in the truth for a while, sometimes it's a bit hard to remember, was that what we used to believe, or is this what we believe now? So to help us to make sure that we've got some idea of some of the events that occur during the Great Tribulation, let's look at this review.
This is how Jeff introduces a review of what Jehovah's Witnesses are supposed to believe about the Great Tribulation, by admitting that the doctrine flip-flops so much that it's hard to keep track of. But let's see what the Jehovah's Witnesses up to this point believe would happen in the near future.
What event starts the Great Tribulation? The destruction of Babylon the Great. That will be the time when the political powers turn on the world empire of false religion, showing their disgust for this symbolic prostitute. This will lead to the destruction of all false religious organizations. What event ends the Great Tribulation? The Battle of Armageddon. That will be the final part of the Great Tribulation. Jesus, along with the resurrected 144,000 and myriads of angels, will battle with all those who oppose Jehovah, His kingdom, and His people here on earth. This will be the war of the great day of God the Almighty.
Okay, so let's recap. These are the things Jehovah's Witnesses are dogmatic about. The Great Tribulation starts with the fall of every single religion on earth other than Jehovah's Witnesses, and ends with the 144,000 being swooped into heaven to fight and kill everyone on earth who isn't a good Jehovah's Witness. For decades, they have taught that once the fall of Babylon the Great happens and the Great Tribulation starts, no one would be able to convert to the Jehovah's Witnesses and therefore be saved. They have even had dramatizations about it just this month. This all made sense. Once you had irrefutable proof that the religion is right, it's too late to convert. And this is all about to change.
Now that we have the start and the end of the Great Tribulation in mind, let's ask a few more questions. How long will that time period be from start to finish? The answer is, we don't know. We do know that many events are foretold to happen during that time period. But these events may all occur in a reasonably short period of time. For this discussion, though, let's focus on the few events that will occur toward the end of the Great Tribulation. When does the attack of Gog of Magog occur? It doesn't occur at the beginning of the Great Tribulation, but toward the end of that period of time. This attack on God's people by a coalition of nations will lead right into the Battle of Armageddon. So Gog's attack will occur just prior to Armageddon. When will the remaining ones of the anointed be gathered and taken to heaven? The Bible book of Ezekiel indicates that when Gog of Magog starts his attack, some of the anointed will still be here on earth. However, Revelation 17:14 tells us that when Jesus battles with the nations, he will come with those who are called and chosen, that is, all of the resurrected 144,000. So the final gathering of his chosen ones must occur after the start of the attack of Gog of Magog and before the Battle of Armageddon. This means that the anointed will be gathered and taken to heaven toward the end of the Great Tribulation, not at the beginning. When will the final judgment of the sheep and the goats take place? Again, although we can't be dogmatic as to the exact sequence of events, it appears that the final judgment takes place at the end of the Great Tribulation, not at the beginning. That will be the time when the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all his angels with him.
These are the things Jehovah's Witnesses aren't as dogmatic about. They believe that in between every other religion falling and Jesus and his angels killing almost everyone on earth, a few more things will happen. Like the governments turning against the Jehovah's Witnesses, the anointed being ruptured into heaven, and the judgment of humanity. They believe these things will happen. They just don't have a certain time frame as to when that would happen or how long that would take. Now, let's move on to the new light.
Once the Great Tribulation starts, is there a door of opportunity still available? Well, to answer that, looking at this time chart, remember the judgment of the sheep and the goats, the final judgment occurs when? Not at the beginning, but towards the end of the Great Tribulation. So let's think about some that we know, perhaps unbelieving relatives, disfellowshipped ones, others that have heard the message, perhaps studied with us. Could some of them, once they see the destruction of Babylon the Great, decide that what Jehovah's Witnesses were saying is correct after all? Could they take a stand for the truth? Well, if they changed their hearts and joined us, would we be disappointed? Now, we can't be dogmatic.
Did you hear that nervous laugh? They're laughing at what they're now told they aren't supposed to believe anymore. For decades, they have taught that once the Great Tribulation starts, nobody can be saved. Now they're told that once the Great Tribulation starts, people might still convert into the religion and are made to laugh at what they have believed for most of their lives. And they're going to be made to laugh at it even more.
But of course, we might be thinking, yes, well, I understand why we said what we did before, but is it really the case that all these ones that we've studied with or so on, some of them may have a chance to join us after Babylon the Great is destroyed? Is that fair? Last minute repentance. But you see, are we imitating the merciful judge of all the earth?
It is insane when you realize that the only time Jehovah's Witnesses are allowed to poke fun at their own beliefs is when they are changing those beliefs for something else. Jeff just ridiculed the stand that their religion had had for the better part of 3 decades. And you can hear the nervous laughter of the audience in response, since they're not used to make fun of a belief they just got told they aren't supposed to hold anymore.
Once the Great Tribulation starts, many who have heard the message that Jehovah's Witnesses have preached may be in a position then to make the right decision, the right choice. Well, again, we can't be dogmatic, but we certainly hope that that would be the case. Now, while we're talking about this, let's talk about the elephant in the room. What do we mean? Well, you know, some of us in the past, we're not going to mention names, but you know, some of us have said, oh, you know, my unbelieving relative, or, you know, I hope he dies before the Great Tribulation. We know what you've been saying. You said, because if he dies before the Great Tribulation, he'll have a chance of a resurrection. But during, But let's think about that. You see, does someone's eternal salvation depend on when they die? Or does it depend on really their heart condition? You see, the merciful judge of the earth knows their heart condition. And really, what are we thinking if we ask that question? You know, are we imagining Jehovah saying to Jesus, look, this person, you know, they really should die forever. But look at it, they died now before the Great Tribulation. Oh, no, we have to resurrect them. I mean, really?
I could not believe my ears when I was hearing this. Yes, really, Jeffrey Jackson, that's really what you've been teaching for decades now. Regardless of how nonsensical this sounds, this is what Jehovah's Witnesses believed until this speech. If you die before the Great Tribulation, you have the hope to resurrect as one of the unjust. But you won't if you die during the Great Tribulation, because the time for repentance is over. Jeff tries to make it so it's not about the timing of repentance, but whether or not God thinks that they are a good person before he brings Armageddon. But as I mentioned on the live stream, this is a stupid move, because for the very first time in Jehovah's Witness history, they've opened a door for you to wait until you have proof that the religion is right to mend up your life and support the Jehovah's Witnesses. Jeff just told everyone that they can repent until the Great Tribulation starts. And I just know that many Jehovah's Witnesses will be thinking what I'm thinking. They can stop trying as hard. Wait until they see the fall of all religions happen, and then repent and become perfect Jehovah's Witnesses. I honestly doubt the governing body really thought this through before deciding to reveal this new light. And the new light just keeps on coming.
When does the preaching of the good news of the kingdom finish? Good question. First start, let's remember, the good news is only good news to us and those who accept it. As Psalm 2 mentions, though, for the rest of the world, it's never been good news, has it? So what does Matthew 24:14 tell us? It tells us that the good news is going to be preached, and then the end will come. Let's look at our timeline again. What is the end referred to there? Well, it's the final part of the Great Tribulation. So that means that during the Great Tribulation, the good news of the kingdom will still be preached. And it's still good news to us, but not to the rest of the world. That good news will become more hard-hitting as time goes on, causing people to make a decision one way or the other, whether they accept the kingdom or not.
Jehovah's Witnesses have always publicly told the world that the message they have is a positive message. However, here they actually say out loud what they've been hiding. It's only good news to them. It's bad news to anyone else who decides not to believe them. The message is everyone will be destroyed but us, and the us in that won't include you unless you submit to the authority of the governing body. And he proceeds to muddy the waters even more.
Now, another final interesting question. Will all those living during the Great Tribulation have a full opportunity to decide either for the kingdom or against it? How would you answer? Don't say it out loud. The simple answer is, we don't know. And we don't need to know because we're not the judges. It's above our pay grade. But now there may be a little voice in you saying, but why don't we know? I've always believed during that time, that's it. But you see, each day, we mentioned 150,000 people on average die, 350,000 new babies are born each day. So even if the Great Tribulation was only a few days long, each day you've got more babies being born. And what about areas where the good news hasn't reached to the greatest extent? Maybe in lands where our work is restricted. We might be wondering, well, will we get to preach to every individual? Matthew chapter 10, verse 28, if you look at it later, seems to indicate maybe we won't. So now here's an interesting question. Is it reasonable for us to say that Jehovah and Jesus automatically label millions of people as goats, even though they have never had a full opportunity to respond?
This is, again, another reversal. They had always thought that they would preach to everyone in the world, and only then would the end come. Now they say that there might be people who won't get preached before the end because they don't know, all while telling you that the light is getting brighter.
We look forward to viewing a new video entitled, Become Jehovah's Friend. You are precious to Jehovah. Isn't that fitting? Let's enjoy the video.
Good morning, students.
This is your Principal Rodriguez, and I'm very happy to announce that soon we're going to have our annual holiday party. Isn't that exciting? So get ready for games, treats, and more. It's gonna be great.
Yay! Oh yeah! Oh yeah! Yeah! Oh yeah!
Okay, everybody, settle down. We'll see you all tomorrow.
See you there, Sophia. Oh, wait. You can't go.
This is their new children indoctrination animation, Caleb and Sophia. I reacted to all of the Caleb and Sophia cartoons on stream a while ago, and this one is as bad as they come, starting by separating Sophia from her peers, who, in my experience, pretty much never mock kids who can't go to a school party. And I just want to point out, Jehovah's Witnesses would get in trouble if they drew for themselves Christmas ornaments. But some Bethelites had to draw and design all of these Christmas decorations for this indoctrination cartoon. It just shows you that only the organization can go against its own rules.
Well, that's all for today. Whoa. Before I go, we'd like to announce the award for Student of the Month, which goes to...
Caleb, way to go! Wow, look at Caleb. That's my little brother. With Jehovah's help, he tries to be good in school. I like learning about Jehovah. Are you ready to study? Oh, I'll get my book. I'll meet you outside. Okay. Hey, Zoe. Oh, hey. What you doing? I'm just about to meet Sophia. Why do you hang out with her? She's so different? Weird. She never does anything fun. I mean, you're different, Zoe. But in a cool way. You should hang out with us, not that loser.
Angela, please see me immediately.
See you later, Zoe.
Zoe is Sophia's only friend at school, and that's only because Sophia is indoctrinating her into the religion in school, which is why kids are so mean. This is very clear propaganda, where anyone who isn't a Jehovah's Witness can only be neutral to bad. But to me, the worst part is definitely seeing how Jehovah's Witnesses expect their kids to indoctrinate other kids while in school.
Does it bother you that others think you're different? What do you mean? Some of the other kids say things like, it's weird you can't celebrate holidays, and that you can't have fun. What? Who says we can't have fun? Of course we can have fun. It can be hard sometimes, but it's good to be different. Like Jesus. Like Jesus? Yeah, that's right. We learn a lot about him at family worship.
In the Bible, Jesus said his followers would be no part of the world. What do you think it means to be no part of the world?
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have liftoff.
That's a good guess. But we don't have to leave the planet. He said that he did not want to take his followers out of the world, but
That they should be no part of the world.
That's right, honey.
what else did Jesus say? They are no part of the world, just as I am no part of the world. How was Jesus no part of the world?
Let's see. Jesus was different from everyone else, and so were his friends. He showed others how to be different in what they did, what they said, and even how they thought.
Really? How?
People aren't always nice to others they think are different. But Jesus wanted to help everyone, and that made some people very angry. They wanted Jesus to be more like them.
But he didn't worry about what they thought, because who did Jesus want to be like?
Jehovah.
That's right. Jehovah said that those who obeyed his voice were special to him. So, when you love and obey Jehovah, and you are no part of the world like Jesus,
that makes you special to him. I don't know if I could ever be like you. What do you mean?
Okay, settle down.
I don't know. I gotta go.
This is how Jehovah's Witnesses children are supposed to act, like little Jehovah's Witness adults who only talk to kids who aren't in the religion to convert them. Otherwise, they're told that they are no part of the world, which isolates them from their peers, and are taught that their peers can only be either converted, indifferent, or against them, never like them. This kind of indoctrination atrophies children's natural abilities to socialize and only makes it harder for them to socialize when they're adults. Also, did you notice how Caleb and Sophia's parents are getting wider and wider with each iteration?
When you love and obey Jehovah, that makes you special to him.
Hey, it's a leopard.
Get away! We don't want you here. He shouldn't be here.
Lord, if you just want to, you can make me clean.
I want to be made clean.
It's a miracle.
Can you believe this? Jesus isn't one of us.
Jesus was different in what he did, said, and thought.
I'm sorry about your grandma. This is for you. It will help you feel better.
Thank you. And that made some people very angry.
Oops, I didn't see you there. Are you okay? Let me help.
Sometimes they pick on me too. People aren't always nice to others that they think are different.
You should hang out with us, not that loser.
But Jesus wanted to be like his father, Jehovah. And that's what made him special.
Hey, darling. How was your study with Sophia?
Mom! There's something I want to show you.
Oh, okay.
This is a nonsensical lesson that Zoe learns. The lesson about Jesus healing the leper, who was treated like the modern Jehovah's Witnesses treat disfellowship people because it wasn't the law, not because they came up with it, is twisted. It's no longer a lesson about Jesus showing compassion towards the most humiliated and looked down on group in society back then. It's a lesson about how Jesus was different, so you need to be different too. There's practically nothing they can use from the Bible to be an isolationist group, so they have to make up their own lessons from Bible stories.
All right, everyone, enjoy the holiday party.
Hey, Zoe. Aren't you coming? Let me show you how it's done. Hi, guys. You didn't go to the party? No, I want to do the right thing. Okay, let's have some fun. Oh, not again.
Not going to the Christmas party and instead isolating herself is labeled as doing the right thing. This is how insidious this religion is, atrophying the social skills of its followers since they are kids, so they become fully dependent in the religion and have no friends outside who can support them if they ever decide to leave.
The town board approved the special permit for us to be able to cut the trees. However, when we went to exercise that permit, we realized that another agency still had to give their permission for us to be able to use it, which we didn't get.
Originally, we had planned about 12 weeks to do all of this work.
And that 12 weeks included using mechanized equipment.
If that wasn't accomplished, we would be waiting an entire year to be able to cut those trees. Well, the window started closing from 12 weeks to 8 weeks, all the way down to 6 weeks.
And then somehow something in the permitting language opened our eyes to a new possibility that allowed us to take the trees down in a different way.
We got permission to cut the trees, but we had to cut the trees all by hand.
And in 4 weeks, we used an outside contractor to take down all the trees that we needed.
2 weeks early of the end of the tree cutting season.
This is how Jehovah's Witnesses are taught Jehovah acts, by keeping some random piece of land from being sold so the religion can build yet another studio 3 kilometers away from the current headquarters. Stephen Led is here looking puffier than ever and with a band-aid on his hand to talk about the projects the organization has in this update of what the religion is all about: real estate.
One exciting feature of the Media Center will be the use of video walls for virtual production. In fact, we've already begun filming with this new technology here at Patterson. With these video walls, we can create digitally backgrounds that can be used to give the appearance that we are shooting it in a foreign location.
I'm sure this is super exciting, my brother. Let's move on to the rest of Stephen Led's speech, who I'm sure has something interesting to say.
But now, as we said, we had another update, and that's concerning the exciting project that is going on in Australia. And as you know, it's the series of dramas entitled The Good News According to Jesus. Please enjoy this video update.
The Good News According to Jesus is a dramatization of Jesus' life according to the Jehovah's Witness theology, and they've been hyping up this production for years now with teasers of how great it's going to be, just like this one.
We had to pick and choose which scenes that we had to shoot first because construction was trying to keep up with our film schedule. So trying to manage those two together was quite difficult.
Some of the challenges also are depicting miracles. How are you going to depict some of the various illnesses and diseases?
How to film scenes like the miraculous catch of fish and Jesus walking on water in a realistic way.
It's a weighty responsibility, but there's also the amazing joy of being able to learn more about Jesus just through the process of trying to put it on film.
Yeah, whatever. You know, the behind the scenes in a movie is usually interesting when you've actually seen the movie, so you have the context of what the fuck they're talking about. This is just them talking about the challenges they had filming scenes we haven't seen, so this is completely meaningless. However, they did mention something interesting.
So one particular episode required the Judean wilderness. After reviewing a few options here within the country of Australia, we saw that it wasn't as feasible as we would have liked for it to be. After presenting the information to our brothers in oversight, we got a response that we didn't anticipate. They came back asking, what about Israel? A small crew traveled to Israel and actually filmed in the real Judean wilderness. The local branch office provided support. A number of scenes were filmed. And now when we're reviewing the material, we see Jehovah blessing that arrangement.
The backlot is a huge film set. It has 5 historical areas. We have the temple area and the temple slab, Jerusalem area, there's Cana or Galilee, and then there's Capernaum, including a little beach area, and Nazareth. The backlot has roads, mounds, just landscapes so that we can have a variety of filming.
So, it sounds like they're spending probably a few $1 million in this series in not only building gigantic sets, but in traveling to Israel, or as I like to call it, occupied Palestine. Stephen then proceeds to let us know that the first few episodes are going to be shown at conventions next year, and gives us what we all want to see, a teaser of the most hyped up production in Jehovah's Witness history, not before giving us a very self-serving joke about the importance of following the governing body.
And I think you'll enjoy it. It's a short preview. I know it's really early to show you something for the 2024 convention, and I hope I don't get into trouble with the governing body for showing this prematurely. Just kidding. I hope you don't think I'm that stupid. It is with the governing body's full blessing and approval that we show you
there is no joke here. The joke here is, get it? Because we cannot do anything without the approval of the governing body, and the crowd goes wild. Let's watch this fucking trailer.
Seeing that many have undertaken to compile an account of the facts, I resolved also, because I have traced all things from the start with accuracy.
Do not be afraid, Mary. You will become pregnant and give birth to a son. And you are to name him Jesus.
Let Jehovah be praised, the God of Israel, because he has turned his attention to his people and has brought them deliverance.
For look, I am declaring to you good news. For today, there was born to you in David's city a Saviour, who is Christ, the Lord.
Look, Jehovah's slave girl. May it happen to me according to your declaration.
This looks exactly like what I expected. A small Christian movie about Jesus from 15 years ago. Jehovah's Witnesses productions always look like they're stuck in the past, and even though the acting seems a bit better in this series, the unimaginative shots, bland color palettes, and amateurish visual effects immediately age the movie, making it look like it came from the past. Because this is what you get when you see cinema not as an art form, but as an indoctrination tool for your boring cult.
Could not these projects, if needed, be finished after the Great Tribulation and then used powerfully in the New World? And thinking of the Good News According to Jesus episodes, would they not be wonderful tools to teach resurrected ones about God's Son?
This is how delusional they are. They think that it doesn't matter if they don't get to finish this before Paradise comes, because these series are going to be so good that they might be used to indoctrinate resurrected people in Paradise, instead of, I don't know, using the Bible and the original Gospels. But that's how the leadership gets away with doing what no Jehovah's Witness is allowed to do: plan for the future.
The day was Nisan 11, 33 CE. Jesus was busy in the temple teaching just a few days prior to his death. He silenced the scribes and the Pharisees with his irrefutable logic, at the same time sharing some of the most profound teachings of his earthly ministry. For instance, pay back Caesar's things to Caesar, but God's things to God.
This is a boring speech by Gage Flegel, supposedly real name, that talks about the importance of loving God with all your heart, soul, and all of that. And I think it's only here because they ran out of interesting topics before assigning one to Gage.
Recently, on a trip to the western United States, my wife and I were able to observe bison, elk, and moose. From a safe distance, of course. They're humongous, very powerful animals. Well, what if Jehovah had chosen one of them to declare his praise? Every time you would approach, they would say, "Praise Jah." But he hasn't. They just eat grass. They praise Jehovah in a different way.
So let's skip this boring speech to get to Garrett Lush, who is here to talk about the importance of tithing. And here is where things start to get interesting.
Later in human history, Jehovah created the nation of Israel and gave them a beautiful land full of good things. How could the Israelites show their appreciation? Jehovah again provided an opportunity for his people to give. In this case, he gave them a command to tithe. What is that? To tithe means to give a tenth of something. Israelites were to give Jehovah a tenth of all their produce and animals.
When I was watching this speech, my mind was being blown because I was completely sure that this had to be about the Jehovah's Witnesses formalizing tithing inside the congregations, because Garrett keeps going on and on about the importance of tithing.
As we have seen, the tithing arrangement provided a wonderful way for God's people to show their love and appreciation for Jehovah and to support pure worship. Imagine also how those who were disadvantaged, the alien residents, widows, and fatherless boys, also appreciated this loving provision. But did you know there was something else very interesting about the tithing arrangement? Nowhere in the scriptures did Jehovah arrange for any human to monitor whether each person was really giving the entire tenth of his produce and his animals.
And here is the point that Garrett wants to get to. The convoluted point is that tithing wasn't monitored. And that revelation, after an exhaustingly boring speech about tithing, brings us to the setup that Garrett wants to build.
How do we as individuals support modern-day arrangements for pure worship? And does a closer examination of the arrangements for pure worship in ancient Israel indicate a need for further adjustments today?
He's asking if examining the scriptures where it talks about giving money means they should change something today. And spoiler alert, they just decided they should. And they gave the job to announce the biggest change their religion has ever seen to the least alive member of the governing body, Samuel Hurd.
Of course, we no longer have a fixed amount of our income that we're commanded to give to Jehovah. The tithing arrangement ended with the Mosaic Law, and Galatians chapter 6, verse 2 says, "We are now under the law of the Christ." True Christians today give Jehovah just as they have resolved in their hearts. But the tithing arrangement illustrates something that Jehovah still expects of his people today.
If you're lost, they've been going on about tithing because they want to draw a parallel because tithing and something else that they won't be counting anymore. And they have a video to give you a clue as to what that something is.
When did we begin reporting field service activity? Prior to 1920, only colporteurs, as pioneers were then called, were asked to submit reports. But beginning in 1920, everyone in the congregation who participated in the witness work was asked to turn in a weekly report. The 1920 Annual Service Report for the United States was the first to include the activity of congregation publishers. That report revealed that there were 8,052 class workers, or publishers, and 350 pioneers active in the preaching work. Twice a year during the late 1920s, 1 week was designated for a special worldwide witnessing campaign. Pioneers had a goal of 40 hours for that special week. In January 1939, a suggestion was placed before congregation publishers, a goal of 60 hours per month. Early on, congregation field service reports were thorough. Over the years, the forms used to report publishers' field service activity have been simplified. Reports have consistently included back calls or return visits, Bible studies, publication placements, and hours spent in the disciple-making work. As was the case back then, there's always a story behind a field service report.
Jehovah's Witnesses have had to report hours since the times when they sold books door to door, as I've recapped multiple times before. Since more hours spent door to door meant more book sales, the religion tied together selling books door to door with their status as a Jehovah's Witness. Someone who didn't spend even an hour for a few months was labeled as an irregular and then an inactive member of the congregation, and therefore bad association, whereas someone who spent multiple hours was considered exemplary in the religion. The system somewhat changed in 1990, when the religion stopped selling books, but they didn't get rid of the time requirement to go door to door. This is a good time to apologize for a mistake I made in my last video, where I said that you had to spend 10 hours as a publisher to be considered active. As the son of an elder who cared a lot about appearances, I rarely ever reported less than 10 hours, but the minimum to be considered an active Jehovah's Witness was 1 hour, which then shifted to 15 minutes. 10 hours was the minimum to be considered exemplary. I pinned the first comment that corrected me in that video. This is the first blunder of this size that I make in this channel, but rest assured, it won't be the last, so thank you for fact-checking me. And this whole counting system that has been practically useless since 1990 is about to radically change, as you probably already know.
Can you imagine Jehovah judging an Israelite unfaithful because his tenth was less than another person's tenth? Of course not. Everyone's circumstances and abilities are different. Brother Loesch explained that although tithing was a requirement in ancient Israel, Jehovah did not require others to monitor or keep track of each person's tithe. Tithing was entirely between the individual Israelite and Jehovah.
And finally, after over 2 hours and all the fanfare they can possibly make, Sammy gives us the biggest news this religion has had in over 3 decades.
The governing body believes this same principle can be applied when it comes to reporting our time spent in the ministry. Our ministry involves much more than counting time. For this reason, we are pleased to announce that beginning November the 1st, 2023, Congregation Publishers will no longer be asked to report the amount of time they spend in the ministry, nor will publishers be asked to report their placements, the videos they show, or their return visits. Instead, the field service report will simply have a box that will allow each publisher to indicate that he or she shared in any form of the ministry during the month. There will be one more box where publishers report the number of different Bible studies they conduct.
And just like that, the Jehovah's Witnesses get rid of the time requirement they have had for over a century. Now, the average Jehovah's Witness will no longer be expected to report a minimum amount of time to remain active in the congregation. All they need to do is to mark a box saying they talked to someone about the religion, which is what they're expected to be doing anyway. Now, I can't prove this, but I'm willing to bet this has nothing to do with the governing body feeling generous and everything to do with the current situation of Jehovah's Witnesses. Since the pandemic, the Jehovah's Witnesses have barely gone out door to door, and they have been reporting fewer and fewer hours, with a reduction of half of their book studies. It's obvious that more and more Jehovah's Witnesses are becoming inactive. So the governing body is asking them to just say they've talked about the religion, which they're supposed to do anyway, to remain a part of the religion. Now, anyone going inactive will have all the eyes on them, because it'll be quite suspicious that you haven't talked about the religion to anyone in months, and will indicate clearer than ever that you are in need of re-indoctrination.
The Nazarites had to meet certain requirements that were not expected of Israelites in general. The same is true of modern-day pioneers. They have volunteered to devote a certain number of hours to spend in the ministry. Thus, auxiliary and regular pioneers, special pioneers, missionaries, and circuit overseers and their wives will continue to report the number of hours they spend in the ministry, along with the number of different Bible studies they conduct.
All this talk about counting hours not being biblical only applies to common Jehovah's Witnesses. All of the pioneers, missionaries, and even circuit overseers have to continue reporting hours. Why? Well, because those hours are actually profitable for the religion. Unlike regular publishers who go out every now and then to pretend to look for converts, pioneers and missionaries are the ones who build kingdom halls, so the religion can sell them down the line. And those hours are reported as spent in the ministry, not because they're actually in the ministry, but because, just like when they sold books, these hours translate into money for the religion. This religion is losing the hour requirement only so the numbers don't look bad, but it's keeping the hour requirement where they can still make a profit.
What will these adjustments in reporting our ministry mean for you elders and circuit overseers? It will be even more important that you brothers be discerning shepherds. You will have to know the flock well. For example, evaluating a congregation's spiritual health or a brother's qualifications to serve as an elder or ministerial servant will not simply be a matter of computing averages, time spent in the ministry, literature placements, and so forth. No, you will have to know the brothers. What is their attitude toward the ministry? Are they zealous for pure worship? What is their reputation in regard to the ministry? Do they take advantage of opportunities to give a witness? Do they help others to do so, including the members of their family?
What Sammy is saying is that elders will no longer be able to look at the time spent in the ministry as a spiritual health gauge. Instead, Samuel insists that you will now have to know how committed to the religion are the rest of the members of the congregation, how happy they look in the ministry, and how much they help indoctrinate others. Now, more than ever, Jehovah's Witnesses are going to be expected to not forget to smile for the sake of the religion. This is a departure from their door-to-door ministry, which started with the introduction of cards and is now necessitated after people refusing to go back out post-COVID. This marks the end of the door-to-door ministry and of their evangelizing efforts that go beyond standing next to a card and pointing to a website. And I bet a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses know about this. That's why there's one speech left. The speech to gaslight everyone into believing that this slowdown means they're increasing the pace right before Armageddon. You see, this isn't the sign of a dying religion struggling to keep members in. This is, in fact, evidence that they're about to explode in numbers once again, and that the end is all but just so out of reach you can barely touch it.
Well, Jesus did not use a memorized presentation. He just talked with people, and he shared with them the truths that he knew would touch their hearts. He was very quick to choose topics and words based on the interests and the concerns of the person that he was speaking to. Well, now, with all of this in mind, you may be wondering, well, you're supposed to be wondering, but how can I display that same love for the people that I meet? See, wouldn't it be wonderful to have a little bit more help to see how we can show love for people and make disciples? See, wouldn't it be wonderful to have a publication that would help us to be more flexible and more responsive to the different needs and interests of the people that we meet? And what if that publication highlighted specific ways that Jesus and other first century evangelizers showed their love as they made disciples? Well, you will be happy to know that Jehovah's organization has produced just such a publication. It's a 32-page brochure entitled, "Love People, Make Disciples."
This is a boring entire presentation after a boring entire generic speech about preaching, and I think even Mark Sanderson knows that. Did you catch those ironic remarks? Mark knows this isn't news, especially after the news that they're getting rid of the hour requirements. However, this brochure isn't for non-Jehovah's Witnesses. This brochure is for Jehovah's Witnesses and will change midweek meetings forever.
This new publication, Love People, Make Disciples, is being made available in both print and digital formats in over 400 languages.
Since they're getting rid of the hourly requirement, they're also finally getting rid of the old rehearsed sales presentations from back when they used to sell books. This would have otherwise been the biggest news in the annual meeting, as this will shape the indoctrination Jehovah's Witnesses will get every week directly and indirectly.
Beginning in January 2024, the Apply Yourself portion of each midweek meeting will help us to practice the points we are learning in this new brochure. The meeting will no longer focus on presenting a predetermined topic in Scripture. Rather, students will select topics for their assignments that they know are on the minds of those in their community. By means of realistic demonstrations, audience discussions, and talks, our meetings will assist us to develop skills that will help us start conversations naturally and adapt to each person's concerns and needs.
The Jehovah's Witness leadership has to be aware by now that the door-to-door preaching isn't working anymore. So they're revamping midweek meetings to be better focused on how to convert locals into the religion. And I am sure this new given autonomy to congregations will immediately end up with more culty meetings being leaked to the public, where they say the quietest and most damning parts about the religion out loud. This is the latest in yet another change to the meetings that makes them completely unrecognizable from how they were just a bit over a decade ago.
By focusing on people, we will become more comfortable and more effective as we make disciples. As you consider each lesson, think carefully about how you can demonstrate the highlighted qualities when conversing with people in your community. Ask yourself, what are their concerns and needs? As you go about your activities, be observant. Look for appropriate opportunities to help people in practical ways. Acts of kindness can open the door to share kingdom truth.
I wanted to include this clip because this is how Jehovah's Witnesses see opportunities to help others, as indoctrination opportunities. If you're helping someone, it should be because you want to give good testimony, and not because you see a fellow human needing an extra hand that you can provide.
More than any specific technique, actively expressing our love for others will help us make disciples.
Jehovah's Witnesses don't love others. As we just discussed, the good news are only for insiders, not outsiders. This is how the Jehovah's Witnesses see everyone in the world, as them having the privilege to convert into God's chosen people, never as individuals whom you might agree to disagree.
Of course, the question you may be wondering is, when will you receive your copy of this new brochure? Well, you'll be pleased to know that it's going to be made available to all congregations in electronic format and, in most places, in printed format by November 6. In addition, this entire 4-part symposium will be posted on jw.org on November 6, so that all of our brothers and sisters will hear the information in the symposium at the same time. Isn't that great? Now keep in mind, November 6 is just 1 month from now. So, for those who are listening to this program live today, can you keep this new brochure confidential for 1 month? What is your answer?
And I assume that's why the religion has been striking XJW channels like Jake's from Old Worldly, who got a copyright strike to take down the excerpt of Samuel Hurd giving the announcement and tried to strike another one of his videos. The religion also gave me a copyright strike, putting my channel in danger of deletion and deleting my live reaction to this annual meeting. I gave them a counter strike, which basically means they have 10 business days to either release my video or take me to court for copyright infringement. I have the sneaky suspicion that that's what they wanted. They wanted to prevent people from seeing this annual meeting before November 6th. But if you're watching this, it's only proof either that they're failing or that I never know when to quit. That's why this video, unlike my live streams and like every other video, goes up as soon as I have it ready to go on Patreon, where Watchtower can't touch it with their copyright infringement nonsense. Thank you so much to everyone who supports me, by the way, because even with $3 you can support the channel so I can keep making these videos faster than the organization can try to delete them. And this is a great time to recap what just happened.
So what have we learned in this 4-part symposium? In part 1, Brother Flegel reminded us why we love Jehovah and how our love motivates us to want to praise him. In part 2, Brother Loesch explained the differences between most Israelites and those who volunteered to be Nazarites. In part 3, Brother Hurd helped us to see that Although congregation publishers will no longer report their time in the ministry, this in no way diminishes our individual responsibility to make disciples. And finally, in this part, we received a new tool that will help us to show our love for people and to make disciples.
Weird how they like to present things, isn't it? But before he goes, Mark Sanderson tries one last time to tell you how this means Jehovah's Witnesses are better teachers than ever.
You think back in the 1930s, when our brothers became so zealous in the ministry, they went out with phonographs and testimony cards. But of course, at that time, they didn't speak. Either the record did the speaking or people read the card. My mother loved to tell the story about being in the service with her pioneer partner. The door opened, she handed the man the testimony card. Of course, didn't say anything. The man started to read it. Suddenly his wife called out, "Who's at the door?" And the man said, "I don't know, there's two deaf women here and I'm trying to figure out what they want." Well, that was the reality. We weren't speaking.
This arguably funny story hides a fact. Nowadays, they don't look like deaf and mute people, but they do the exact same thing. They go door to door to show people videos. They no longer do any teaching. They direct people to jw.org and that's it. Jehovah's Witnesses were good teachers back in the 80s and 90s when they had to memorize very complex doctrine that barely made sense back then. But now all you need to do is to be obedient to the governing body to be a part of the religion. No critical thought required. And the annual meeting is almost over, but not before Mark tries his best to gaslight everyone in the audience one last time.
These adjustments do not mean that we are in any way slacking off in our ministry. It does not mean that we are slowing down as we approach the Great Tribulation. Nothing could be further from the truth. Right now, we have more than 50,000 applications from students who want to attend the School for Kingdom Evangelizers. We're appointing new missionaries, new special pioneers and temporary special pioneers, and an army of new regular pioneers. And in some lands like the Philippines, sorry, I have to mention the Philippines, we're experiencing record growth. Can you imagine a 9% increase this year?
Mark Sanderson is sorry he mentions the Philippines because even he knows he's only mentioning them because they are the only ones experiencing growth above population replacement rates. But they're never going to experience any kind of growth like this in the United States or even Latin America for that matter. Those times are over.
For those of you who like facts and figures, we still have something for you. Here are the attendance figures for the program today. So we begin with Canada, 872. U.S. Bethel, 11,973. Newburgh Assembly Hall, 2,658. J.W. Stream, 95,589. Grand total, 111,092. That's wonderful.
Yeah, I was many of the attendants in JW Stream as you were able to just type whatever number up to 30 and I got in and out multiple times.
Now it's fitting as we approach the Great Tribulation that we now have received a better understanding of these things. Don't you agree? It's very good.
No, we haven't. We haven't gotten clearer understanding. In fact, the organization has never used "we don't know" more than today. The religion is going in reverse, where the further we move on to the last days, the more obscure, convoluted, and confused their doctrine gets. But this is how the annual meeting concludes. This was definitely a historic annual meeting, starting with the new light of them flip-flopping and saying now we don't know if the people got destroyed were good people capable of resurrection or not. And Jeff then told us that we can wait until every single religion but the Jehovah's Witnesses is destroyed to convert, because now we can convert to the religion when the Great Tribulation starts. We also got news about how they are revamping the midweek meetings to try to find ways to convert locals. And we got the historical announcement of the end of reporting hours for the average Jehovah's Witness and the beginning of the end of the door-to-door preaching work. This was a historic annual meeting that changed the religion, muddied the waters of the doctrine, and made it easier than ever to remain an active Jehovah's Witness while still asking Jehovah's Witnesses building kingdom halls and other buildings to keep counting hours. What do you think of it? Do you think Tony Morris being removed had anything to do with these changes? It sure looks like he stopped being a member of the governing body and we got all these changes, almost as if he was the only one stopping these changes from happening. Do you think, like me, that this change of not counting hours is exclusively to avoid embarrassment and to try to keep hold of the members, or do you think there's something else going on? Thank you so much for watching it. If Watchtower takes down this video too, we'll see you on Patreon, where I'll make it free to watch, which I can do thanks to all my supporters. Also, I'm sorry for the audio. This audio was recorded in my earbuds because my microphone is just stopped. I think I need a new microphone. But so thank you so much for tolerating the audio. I did my best. I'll see you later.